It is definitely feeling not just like fall right now, but like Thanksgiving era winter. Pretty chilly. I'd say 38 degrees at the most. Kind of stormy looking. I know that they had snow in Western Massachusetts and Western Connecticut earlier today. Today is Monday, November 17th, 2025. This is like the first time that I've stepped outside for the afternoon. I've been taking care of a lot of business related things and putting out fires, making phone calls, coordinating visits, and still have to go see dad or try to see dad either this evening or tomorrow morning. He's at the hospital and he's had a nonstop crazy day with multiple blood transfusions. Um, I think they gave him 4 transfusions this afternoon because the dipshit doctors last night and earlier today refused to pay attention to a lot of blood loss that he was showing and that the nurses were documenting with photographs. The doctors just were like, oh no, this is just normal routine blood loss. Like, we really don't need to worry about anything. And then they noticed that he was very pale, was literally passing out, and they negligently delayed giving him transfusions until later this morning. So that is negligence. I mean, I was like praising them yesterday, and now I'm like, you know what? These doctors should be taken to court. This is ridiculous. They literally were leaving a patient, an elderly patient, who was repeatedly calling the nurses because he was bleeding out, telling the nurses were like, okay, we'll tell the doctor. And then the dipshit doctors were like, oh, that's just normal. I mean, we don't need to worry too much. It's really no cause for concern. And then by this morning, the patient was like literally severely anemic and the blood count was showing that. So now they're catching up. I hope that these transfusions have an effect and make a difference. 4 blood transfusions within 4.5 hours is very serious. I mean, that's when you're catching up and trying to save somebody's life. This is at Yale New Haven. I mean, this is unreal. You think that they would know better? This is not some podunk regional hospital. That's like a major hospital, not just in Connecticut, but in New England. And they're embarrassing themselves. We can document this. The fact that this elderly patient was allowed to bleed out repeatedly for over 24 hours. And every time there was blood loss, he would call the nurses and they would take pictures. And then the nurses would send the images to the doctors. And the doctors were basically just stubbornly and arrogantly saying that this is normal and routine blood loss to be expected after a surgery. Are you kidding me? Maybe they should go back to medical school because the patient's test results showed what the patient was trying to tell the nurses for hours, that he was experiencing unusual and severe blood loss. And then the test results proved everything he had been trying to say to the nurses and the doctors. And they were ignoring him, not the nurses, but the doctors. They seem to think they know better. And they seem to think that a patient's own concerns about what they know isn't normal for them should be ignored, batted away, pushed aside in preference of the doctor's own personal opinions when the doctors were ignoring documentation in the form of photographs from nurses. 6 photographs from nurses over a few hours were ignored by the medical doctors who are supposed to be in charge of saving patients' lives. Instead, they are putting the patient's life at risk. Now it looks like it's going to snow. It's really cold, and I still have to head out this evening to the hospital. I really don't care what the weather is. Obviously, I'm just documenting the fact that it definitely feels like it's not just Thanksgiving, but now it's feeling like December. There's still some leaves on the trees. Obviously, this tree still have its leaves. I think it's an oak tree, and they tend to lose their leaves later. But this is very wintry, and I love this. I mean, I love this weather. This is fabulous weather. If you love winter and autumn and all things, Thanksgiving, Christmas, even Halloween. It's just too bad that, there's always like some issues that are caused by external components that have nothing to do with the family. Stupid doctors in this case who repeatedly and deliberately ignore a patient's own cries for help about severe blood loss that isn't normal for them. And the doctors bat it away and say, oh no, it's just normal. It's post-surgical blood loss, Yeah, we see that all the time. And then they see the blood test results and they're like, oh shit, here, let's give him some transfusions. 4 transfusions within 4.5 hours. Are you kidding me? They should be taken to court for malpractice. I'm going to find out what those doctors' names are, actually. Um, but yeah, first appreciating this lovely sunset, this beautiful wintry weather, which I actually do like. And yeah, okay, I'm going to go back inside because I think I'm freezing right now. So, if you're like me and you believe in karma, the law of the universe, which is to balance everything out in terms of throwing the boomerang back and in divine justice, then you don't feel the need to go after people unless it's through legitimate channels, such as a court system or through attorneys, which is a court system, I guess. And so, whatever these doctors were deliberately doing in terms of ignoring dad's repeated concerns about blood loss, that was highly unusual and pretty severe over the last 24 hours. Well, whether or not these doctors were deliberately being negligent or accidentally negligent, they'll just get it back in the form of karma, right? So there are malpractice suits that are legitimate. I don't know if we're going to go that far. I mean, I think that the transfusions that dad received today, which were again, I'm going to say this again, 4 transfusions within 4.5 hours, um, kind of a big deal. But, you know, if this was malicious on anybody's part or deliberately, let's call it activistic, meaning you don't like the patient or you think that they are a member of an ethnicity or racial group that you don't like. And my father seems to be on a list due to his last name that cause trigger reactions of prejudice, discrimination, and hatred in inferior individuals who tend to believe that someone's last name and their ethnicity have something to do with their worth as a human being. Well, they're just going to get their karma back, right? There's a God, there's a universe. We're all part of that universe. We live in a universe that is based on balance. Nothing on this planet works if it is out of balance, including your car's suspension system and your own body. So, balance is always restored at one point or another. So, whatever these doctors were doing by ignoring my dad's repeated and, pretty significant pleas for help due to his blood loss, well, they will just get it back, right? And unfortunately, what often happens is when a member of a family does something really bad, the karma doesn't always land on them. It lands on other members of their family. I'm just saying. So again, I don't go after people. I let God and the universe take care of that. And that's often a way more potent and effective form of justice than dragging somebody into court, right? Because the court system is flawed. Judges are biased. You can pay off judges, but God doesn't mess around, and you don't buy off God because he's not corrupt the way a lot of judges seem to be these days. So, karma's a bitch. Don't ignore patients when you don't like their ethnicity or their last name or their religion or whatever you think they stand for, because that crazy bullshit is going to land back in your lap. And it might not be your lap, it might be your family member's lap. Just keep that in mind.